Is it just me, or did Thaos treat this area like it was his home and that I was the intruder? I've thought long and hard about this person in the months that he became entangled with my life. This man who lived many lives with clear memories of all of them could not have been doing more evil. This soul is responsible for who knows how many deaths and how much suffering throughout the world, throughout the ages. He even admitted to be the key instigator in many atrocities that aren't even in the history books due to their either being too far from here and no one knows them, or heard of them, or that these people and their civilizations are lost to time. I understand the desire to achieve a noble and good goal that makes the world better for all kith. But, and there is a big but here, to do this despite caring who you harm or how many you destroy to accomplish this, especially when it affects so many, then you are doing much more harm than good. Worse, I truly believe that to knowingly accept a lie and perpetuate that lie like it was truth as the foundation of your goal to make the world better, then you have not only deceived everyone, but you are in fact the exact opposite of what you claim to be or claim to be doing for everyone. Thaos and the ancient Ingwithans couldn't possibly know that by accepting the fact that the gods do not exist, that it would destroy the people by making their lives meaningless, that they in turn would bring their own civilizations to ruin because the gods aren't there to guide them. I would rather die knowing the truth than live believing in a lie. I would rather we as all kith form our own direction based on what we ourselves believe to be the best course, than to have false gods tell us what that course is to be. If it brings us all to ruin, then so be it, but at least we would have the chance to live with true freedom, knowing the truth, than to be bound by the ideas of something that does not really exist. So, other than bandaging, does anybody have any bandages? Pelagina has a few. Thank you. I took a really bad fall there.
Ready, Watcher.
How may I help?
What? I'm ready.
Hey.
Nobody else has bandages? Okay. Well, you're all looking at me like you want to say something, so...
Hey.
Ader, we'll start with you.
Thaos, he had hold of your soul from a long time back, seems like. You get what you needed from him?
I got justice.
Not many can say that these days. Not with the gods using the world to settle their problems.
No.
You'll be feeling better soon, then. Good. That's real good. You got it figured out what you're going to do about all that?
Up the machine? Yeah. I know what I'm gonna do.
Got a lot of people out there thinking they've been abandoned by their gods. There's not much that'll put the fear in you more than that. You can take my word for it.
Understandable.
If it was in my power, and I know it's not, but if it was, I'd find a way to give them the courage to face it. Not because they think there's some god looking out for them, but because they've just got it in them. And after what you've been through, though, I'm sure you got your own ideas. Better make it good.
I'm ready.
Pelagina.
So much for Thaos, then.
The membranes of Pelagina's golden eyes sweep out and retract as she gazes into the great machine.
Now you have a chance to set things right, back to the proper order of things. It will take the Deerwood generations to recover, but at least these souls will find their way back to the wheel, as it should be.
Agreed. I expect nothing but a gruff what I should be doing from you, Durrance.
Ah, the end of the road greets us at last. You fared well, Watcher. Better than any Watcher has right to. Seems you were afield in need of a flames cleansing. Would that my own trial had produced such an outcome. I had figured myself for the field all this time. But you were the field, and I the darkness. A lesson neither of Durrance nor of Margaret. But with that trial's end, a new one begins. A god's trial. And I will stand in judgment without mercy.
I'll be standing right next to you on that.
How may I help?
Eloth?
Astounding. I always knew the leaden key stood for something big, but I didn't quite realize what I'd gotten myself into. And now, you're in the middle of something even bigger. With a decision that will affect millions. But even if you send the souls somewhere specific now, who knows what the next turn of the wheel will make of them? We can't really control what happens to them. Nor should we try. I had to see the monster Thaos had become to realize that.
I won't leave something this important up to chance.
It's your decision, of course. And whatever you decide, I'm glad our paths crossed in Gilded Vale.
I'm here.
Sagani?
Never thought I'd see something like this in my travels. Lends a little perspective, doesn't it?
Alright. You want to pitch into Tumac? Or the Black Hound?
Mm-hmm.
Let us see what changes I can do. As I approach the machine, the path underfoot suddenly changes to a cobbled road. If I hadn't experienced visions like this already in Tir Evron, I'd be tempted to believe that the machine had sucked me into it and deposited me in the middle of nowhere. The sun blazes overhead, and the rolling meadows and thick forests on either side of the road could be anywhere in the Deerwood. A shrill cackle turns my head. Standing next to me is a malnourished man clad in a threadbare loincloth and manacles. His entire body is striped with lash marks, and there are scarred pits where his nose and ears should be. He stinks of stale sweat and unwashed filth. I notice someone wandering down the road, but the figure's back is to me. The scarred slave has my attention for now.
You know something of quiet servitude, Watcher. Groveling and simpering before the gods whose aid you need, so that when they finally raise you to a place of power, you can seize what you desire.
Skane, possibly the worst of all the gods. Gods that do not exist.
You have labored at the pleasure of others. That shriveled hag in Hadrat House, those pompous dear wooden zealots, the wretched tribesmen playing out their fantasies of grandeur. And then you cowered and knelt before the gods themselves, begging one paltry favor and receiving riddles and visions in response.
That's basically what happened. Yes, so what of it?
And now the gods give you orders and commands, even while you set out to fix what they cannot. Yet what have they offered you?
I am not here for myself. I'm here for the betterment of Deerwood and of the world for all kith. Pelagina says, they offered us the means to stop Boudica and Thaos. That's enough for me. A suspicious grimace crosses Eloth's face. I get the feeling that this is his way of giving me new orders on behalf of his own master. Be careful, Keldon Zatha. Skane, given the breadth of the iron manacle, it's amazing that he can raise his bone-thin arm, but he does, and he points to the person walking the other way along the road.
The exiled queen is not an ungrateful patron.
I get a better look at the lone figure and realize that she's wearing robes, tattered and singed, but fine nonetheless. On her head is the silhouette of a broken crown. She continues walking, her pace slow but determined. Boudica.
Finish the work Thaos began. Strengthen Boudica with these souls and allow her to become the most powerful of all the gods, with you as her favored.
I never would have thought that my life would come to the point where I dictate what happens to the rest of the world. I love my father. And I want a family of my own one day. And I don't want to live in a world ruled by these gods. I've been working against Wutica this whole time. Why would she thank me now, after I defeated her most loyal servant? The ragged hole in Skane's face wrinkles with disgust. Loyal and weak, Thaos proved his inadequacy when he failed to anticipate you. A plan exposed is worse than none at all. But you have proven resourceful, equal to the schemes of gods. Wutica has a long memory, Watcher, for both friends and foes, and she keeps her oaths. Helping Wutica would mean that the secret of the gods stay hidden. He rubs his hands together, his black eyes gleaming. Safely hidden, yes. From the violent overlords who would cease to fear punishment in the next life. From the heavy-handed masters who would answer to no one. The world needs some schemes. Or are the souls of Kith so pure that you would snap the tenuous threads that bind society? Eloth snarls. And Thaos makes a better overlord? This one is the god of slaves. What would he have left if the world were unchained from his mistress's lies? What do you mean by her favored? The recipient of Wutica's blessing, she has always had a place for mortals of particular merit. If you help her now, she will become the most powerful of all the gods, and you will be the one who made her so. Think of the lifetimes of reward you would reap. Durance says, the only reward I wish is the joy of pulling bloody shards of her broken crown from my staff when I have finished with her trial. Skane turns his flinty eyes on Durance. So says your companion, who has been abandoned by his own god. Do you really trust him to make alliances for you? Skane takes a bundle at his feet and hefts the burden onto his back. I've explained the alternative, Watcher. Continue as a pawn of the gods or a partner of one. At the other end of the road, the figure stops. She turns her head just enough to look over her shoulder. Her face is mostly hidden, but one merciless eye peers at me from a cheek of rippled, scorched flesh. I won't help you.
You say that now, but when you're standing in front of the machine, considering the lifetimes and the powers that await you, we'll see what you do.
He continues down the road, and when the sun drops below the horizon, it plunges into momentary darkness. I come to my senses in front of the machine. All these evils we've seen, going all the way back to the Saints' War, that was all Wutica. Imagine if she was stronger on top of it all. It's got to end, Ader. It will be a never-ending war. Circles of wars and deceits and treachery and backstabbing that will slow the world down, prevent Kith from advancing themselves, and keep us in this eternal darkness. Not of our own making. Keep that in mind. With my companions bearing witness, I step up to the place where Thaos once stood before his people long ago. The great machine lies in front of me, idle, ready. I have seen this machine and others like it in operation. I understand how it works. It is a device for directing souls. As a watcher, it would be a simple matter to influence that direction, though as big as the machine is, it may be the last thing I ever do. Activate the machine. There is a shrieking of stone grinding against stone as old cogs loosen and begin to turn. I have only moments before the souls will be sent into the Audra vein. This will be my only chance at redirecting them. These are the different options. The only one that wasn't presented to me was, until now, right before now, was the one for Wutica. And that would have me take the place of Thaos. Taking souls from children to give to an idea. So the idea has power over all Kith and the other ideas. It's a bad joke, actually. I will return the souls to the bodies they were intended for. I close my eyes and expand my perception outward, taking in the immense totality of the tens of thousands of souls orbiting the chamber. My grasp on the souls is tenuous. I find myself fighting to keep them all within my influence, and I can feel them slipping away from me as the machine gains speed. A brief moment comes when it feels as though I hold all of them at once, and their force is so great it feels as though they will tear me apart. In that moment, I dedicate my entire being to bending their orbit, channeling their flow in a new direction.
At your command, the ancient device became your instrument, spinning to life with deafening resonance and gathering up the swirling essence like thread on a great spindle. There, in the pale pulsing glow of the machine that set you on this path long ago, you summoned all your strength, focusing on your objective and blocking out all else. With a single concussive blast that rocked the chamber and sent you tumbling to the ground, you freed the souls from their stasis. Exhausted, your consciousness slipping away, your last sight was of the machine, dark and dormant. Then your eyes closed, and sleep welcomed you at long last. After coming to and searching for some time, you discovered the route Thaos used to enter Sun in Shadow, and embarked on a long and arduous ascent back to the surface. You emerged in Ter Evron after days of tunneling through the rubble Thaos had left behind, and when you stepped into the daylight, you were faced with a different Deerwood than the one you had left. At your direction, the souls diverted by Thaos were guided back to the vessels originally meant for them. For the first time, parents of hollowborn children woke to the cries of their infants and looked into their eyes to see them staring back. People fell to their knees where they stood, thanking Helia or Mogren or even Aethys for their forgiveness of whatever guilt they felt they bore. But for all the relief that had come to some parents, others only found new grief. For many thousands of hollowborn had died during Wideone's legacy, many by their parents' own hands. For those children, there would be no homecoming. Yet the last hollow birth was in the past now, and those parents willing to risk trying for a new child were frequently rewarded, often with twins. Many felt they saw Helia's hand in it, and the year would be remembered as the year of Helia's splendor. Lord Radric's zeal had brought him back to life once, but it would not do so again. Radric's destruction at your hands spelled the end of his suffocating rule over Gilded Vale and the surrounding area. In his absence, the village prospered, becoming a popular destination for new settlers anxious to leave Defiance Bay after the riots. Without a nearby ruler, it also grew more wild, with many settlers moving on as soon as they'd arrived, turned off by lawlessness that was excessive even by Deerwooden standards. Nevertheless, despite the challenges of living there, Gilded Vale had survived, and would continue to survive for the foreseeable future. Following the assassinations of Duke Avar Wolfgren and Lady Webb, Defiance Bay was thrown into political upheaval. In the ensuing weeks, the streets had become the domain of looters and blackguards. Few dared to step outside their own doors alone or unarmed. But once the dozens had regrouped in the wake of the riots, they quickly put an end to the criminal activity. They patrolled the streets in droves and administered their brand of law on any perceived offenders. This was not the erratic justice of the mob, however. The dozens had taken to heart the strengths of their adversaries, the Knights of the Crucible, and emerged as a far more organized, disciplined force. With the waning strength of the other Defiance Bay powers, the leadership of the dozens took the opportunity to establish its own group as the dominant peacekeeping force in the city. The dozens would soon find themselves overwhelmed by the problems of a leaderless metropolis. But they found an uneasy new partner in the surviving forces of the Crucible Knights, who understood the city's infrastructure and were able to keep the worst of its problems under control. Though the machine atop Ter Noaneth had been disabled, it had not seen its last use. Heritage Hill was rebuilt, and no sooner had the first families moved in to resettle the district than members of the Leaden Key, acting under standing orders from their Grand Master, climbed the tower and reactivated the machine. The initiates slew a handful of the new settlers under cover of night, and watched as history repeated itself, the victims reanimating and devouring the survivors. After this second incident,
the district would remain abandoned. The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an Animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay, and few Animancers survived the first day. Many Deerwoodans took the end of Widewind's legacy as a sign, both that the gods did not approve of Animancy, and that the purging of Animancers in Defiance Bay had been enough to satisfy them. In time, their rage would subside, and a number of surviving Animancers remained in and around Defiance Bay, often taking to the wilds to practice their science without repercussions. The fortress of Cadnua emerged as a bastion of security in the midst of an untamed land, becoming the envy of every Thane and Earl in Deerwood. Legend grew over time of its impregnability, and stories of formidable invaders easily scattered by the keep's defenses became popular around the hearths of Deerwoodanians. Likewise, it also became a beacon to travelers, merchants, and visiting dignitaries alike. Reputed as the finest fortress in all Deerwood, people would journey from near and distant lands alike to experience its fabled hospitality and grandeur. Palagina had gone against the Duke's Bell's orders by inventing a new trade arrangement with the Anamenfath to accommodate the recovering Deerwoodan market. With the Deerwood's people still weakened by Widewind's legacy, the Valian republics easily pushed their would-be competitors out of the market. For her outrageous insubordination and audacity, Palagina was banished from the republics. She traveled north in the Eastern Reach, avoiding Valian ports and entering the ranks of the kind wayfarers. Despite her bravery and dedication to those in her care, her strange appearance made her feel like an outsider wherever she went. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Still most comfortable far from cities, he settled in Deerford, which, like many towns in the Deerwood, was beginning the slow process of rebuilding. Believing now that it was the obligation of Kith to be the leaders their gods had not, Adair was soon named mayor of the town, and under his guidance, Deerford soon began to prosper. He expelled the last of the Scanites from the area and drew new settlers with the offer of land, a trick he had learned from someone he otherwise preferred to forget. With each passing day, Deerford would come to more closely resemble the Gilded Vale of Adair's childhood, the one worthy of its name. When the dust settled in sun and shadow, Aloth looked upon the remains of Thaos Ixarchanon, his former master. He saw where the Grand Master had gone wrong and what would be required to undo the harm Thaos had wrought. With a flick of his wrist, he burned Thaos's robe, headdress, and every other symbol of the man's power. Never again, he vowed, should Kith live in fear and blind obedience to an authority they did not understand. Armed with the knowledge and courage he had gained on his journeys with the Watcher, he set out on the long and lonely task of dismantling the Leaden Key. After all that he had learned in the Watcher's company, Kanarua could no longer see meaning in his pursuit of the Tanvi Oratoa. He decided to leave what remained of it within the depths of the Endless Paths and return home. Kana bid the Watcher farewell and sailed back to Rawatai, spending the tempestuous journey reflecting on the time he had lost to the pursuit of falsehoods. His family found Kana much changed, his fiery excitement replaced with a weary solemnity. Determined to change his wandering ways, Kana took up a quiet life as a lorekeeper at the college, teaching young students the traditions of their people. With Thaos defeated and the souls released from sun and shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Deerwood. The grieving mother sought a place where she might do penance for the birthing bell. She returned to Deerford, where, to the astonishment of the villagers, she delivered the first healthy child in over a decade. She remained there, and with each new birth, she saw a measure of hope restored to the Deerwood and a measure of grace for her own troubled past. Durrance used Magrin's strength only until Thaos had been cast from the world, and then swore off her influence entirely. Regret came to weigh heavily on his mind, and a man who had never previously lacked for words or opinions came to embrace silence and contemplation. He continued to wander, penniless and destitute, searching now not for the reason for his goddess's silence, but for a mechanism for revenge. the charred robes he continued to wear as a reminder that he had been burned by his goddess, and not just by the flames of the Godhammer. You and Sagani never found Persoc together. The Adra figurine had gone dark by the time they emerged from Sun and Shadow, and it was another month before Sagani finally accepted that Persoc's trail had gone cold again. Her search took her beyond the Deerwood and as far as the Living Lands. She saw the great coastal cities of Rawatai and the ruins of Old Valia, absorbing the details of these strange and distant lands. 20 years passed before the Adra figurine finally glowed again. When it did, she followed its signal to a quiet hamlet on the outskirts of Adir. There, she met a young farmer and told her of her past as an elder of Masuk. Sagani returned to a village that had forgotten her face, but remembered her story. Masuk greeted her with cautious warmth, and Sagani found that their ways had become strange to her. She also learned that Kalu had perished of winter fever a few years before, and her middle child, Najuo, had died in a raid. But she found her daughter Yakona a hunter and mother of 3, and her son Malak a builder of mighty walls. In them, she came to find her place in the village and the familiar contours of a world that had changed in her absence. For you, the death of Thaos brought an end to your waking visions and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead.